And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and a live internet stream. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics Live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. Well, it's happy Thursday for a whole bunch of us, but I don't know about anybody else. Of course, it's always happy on Cowboy State Politics. But if you can hear the wind outside, this is a reminiscent of what my grandmother always used to say. If winter comes in like a lion, it'll go out like a lamb. But if it comes in like a lamb, well, it's probably going to go out like a lion. And that's exactly what's happening today in Cheyenne. The wind's supposed to blow about 1 jillion miles an hour, and it'll probably blow me off the interstate, or at least that's what I'm expecting is going to happen, or at least try anyway. But it speaks to a broader conversation about conservative politics. Do you want to know why conservatives lose so often? It's not because we're nice. I mean, we are nice. This is true. And we do try to be nice to just about everybody. We try to cast the other side as they're the mean ones. The Democrats, they're the ones that will do anything to win. And you've probably heard me say that on this show a lot. But the truth is, the reason why conservatives lose is that we're scared. We're scared of what the base is going to say. We're scared of what the media is going to do to us. Well, I got news for you. The media already hates you. The media already hates me. But I've accepted that, and I've decided that I don't really give a crap what they say. You see, the media in Wyoming, the Cowboy, the Provenza on the Platte, the Oil City News, the list is long and undistinguished. They're already going to write the most negative stuff that they could possibly think of about conservatives. They're always going to paint the other side as winning. They're always going to, write negative stuff about conservatives and positive stuff about the Democrats and the Redcoats. That is always going to be the case. And so it doesn't make much sense to be scared and not to act, and to base your actions or inactions, as the case may be, on fear. That doesn't make any sense, my friends. What motivates the GOP base is conservatives that will fight. Because what we see in Washington, D.C. is not that. We don't see Republicans fighting. You want to know why everybody's so mad at John Thune right now? Because he won't push the SAVE Act through. Because he is just like all of the establishment Republicans, like Mitch McConnell and the rest of them. And sometimes you can probably throw John Barrasso in there. The most dangerous place in the world is in between John Barrasso and a video camera. Everybody knows that. Now, if you're talking about veterans, John Barrasso does a heck of a lot for veterans, and he's a heck of a nice guy. But when it comes to fighting, actual fighting the Democrat liberals, we get very little out of that in Washington, D.C. And for the longest time in Wyoming, we got very little from Wyoming Republicans that were in office. In fact, what we saw were a bunch of campaign promises on our front doorstep. You know, taxes are too high. We love guns. We shouldn't be killing babies. And by the way, you shouldn't have to pay the government to live in your own home, which I guess that's taxes too. And then they go to Cheyenne and they do exactly the opposite. The liberal establishment in Cheyenne votes against all of those things that they told you on their doorstep. That's why they're redcoats. And so the conservative base in Wyoming elected a group of people that were going to fight, that were conservatives, and the great majority of them do fight. But it's not the little wins that people remember. It's all of the big things that happen. And what we saw yesterday was an example of going out like a lamb. That's what it is. Now, in all fairness, things weren't very good from the very beginning. On the third day of the legislative session, Mike Yin gets up and he says, we have to do away with constitutional rights because, there were some checks handed out on the floor and that was terrible. And then on Thursday, Carly Provenza got up and did her thing. But the whole time, there were chances to shut that down. Now, again, that doesn't happen very often, and it just so happened that an opportunity plopped in the Democrats' lap, which they took full advantage of. Rightly or wrongly, they messaged it pretty good. Their allies in the media carried the water for them, and then the session progressed. We had a special investigative committee, special ed committee, and everything continued from there. But the truth is that had Republicans fought in the end, things probably would have ended up a little bit different. But let me tell you what I'm talking about here. So there was another investigative committee of the actions of Carly Provenza and Mike Yin. Now, I don't know who was on it, but it became obvious yesterday on the floor of the House that there was an investigative committee because there were numerous complaints from Wyoming citizens that piled up on the desk of Speaker Chip Nyman. So many that they hadn't seen that type of response from Wyoming citizens probably ever. And the whole reason behind it is the GOP base in Wyoming, the conservative base in Wyoming, saw something that they didn't like, something the Democrats were doing. And so they thought, well, let's give them some ammunition to fight with. And they did. And those complaints piled up on the desk of the Speaker of the House. Now, I mean, I don't know what exactly you do with all of those except set up a committee to investigate, which is evidently what happened. But in the end, conservatives were too nice. And they were too nice because they were too scared of what the media was going to do to them. And quite frankly, my friends, they didn't fight, which is why I say they went out like a lamb. Now, the truth is, you can't take the conservative base for granted. You can't think that all the time they're going to defend you, because eventually they're not going to. They're going to find somebody else that promises to fight for them just exactly the same way that you did. Now, it's not that conservatives in the House don't have the principles. They do. Many of them are my friends. Many of them fought very, very, very hard during the session. But when it all came down to it, when there was the pinnacle moment to deliver a win for Wyoming conservatives, well, they kind of went out like a lamb because they're nice. And they had every opportunity. They were given every opportunity to say what the Democrats did was wrong. But instead, they chose to say, yeah, there was no legislative misconduct. But think about how much work had gone into proving that there absolutely was, that there was a violation of 22-1. And now every news article in the state repeated the words of Jeremy Haraldson. Now there is one caveat to this. He began his speech by saying there's no legislative misconduct for Mike Yin or for Carly Provenza. I think there absolutely was. In fact, I wrote a big giant article about it explaining how there was legislative misconduct, explaining how she made an ethics charge in her right before she delivered her motion. She said it's a question of ethics. And then she referenced Article 3, Section 42 and 43 of the Wyoming Constitution, which is bribery. She didn't follow the procedure in 22-1. And so they had the leadership in the House had a perfect opportunity to deliver a blow to the Democrats, but they didn't. In fact, they said there's no legislative misconduct. Now, after finishing that, and they should have known that was going to be the headline that the media would run with, and they have. The articles out this morning are no legislative misconduct. Now, the second part of what Jeremy Harrelson said is probably the more important part, in which he did say that Carly Provenza did not follow Joint Rule 22-1. In fact, let me play for you what Representative Harrelson said. Hold on just a second, and I'll get us there. The truth is, my friends, that when we have an opportunity, conservatives have to take it. We know that the other side will. We know that they will every time, and they will use every means to do it. Even they'll even break the rules, which is painfully obvious now, because that's what they did. And so when we're in the right, we need to act. And so here's the second part of what Jeremy Harrelson said.
So a couple things that we found that come into play is even though there was no legislative misconduct, some things that did come out of this, we do believe that Representative Provenza's conduct departed from the guidelines established by Joint Rules 22-1, which is adopted by the Wyoming House of Representatives, set out a process for handling ethic complaints in a manner that provides due process to those alleged to have engaged in misconduct. Also, we find that Representative Provenza's conduct subjected members of the Wyoming House of Representatives and the Wyoming House of Representatives itself to public animadversion. Representative Provenza's conduct seriously impugned the integrity and general order of the Wyoming House of Representatives. Constitutional right. It wasn't legislative misconduct, but it doesn't mean there wasn't pain that came.
There's the problem.
And my challenge, and you might say, well, how can you basically have this conversation? We've had a lot of conversations leading up to this to see where we're at. And
how many
under
you were on board before the break?
-1B, nothing in this rule shall prohibit the House and Senate from taking any action or adopting any procedure to preserve order and decorum in the House pursuant to the authority granted in the Wyoming Constitution. And under that statement, what I would ask is of this in the future for the 69th and
Okay, all right. But see, the point is, that should have come first. That was the main complaint against the Democrats, that they didn't follow Rule 22-1. They didn't inform the Speaker. Carly Provenza didn't walk into Chip Nyman's office and say, hey, we got a problem. She went to the press, and she told multiple different stories about it. Provable. They're on video. I mean, it's not like you have to search very hard to go find them. But they didn't do that. You see, words matter, my friends, and the word choice probably matters even more. And the order in which you deliver remarks matters. You see, because Jeremy Harrelson saved that little last part for the end, well, now the headline is very, very different. You see, we are too nice. There's no legislative misconduct, which there absolutely was. Look at the session. Look at everything that happened. And here's the problem. That you have very vulnerable, very conservative people in very, very tough districts. And instead of dealing a blow to the Democrats, which they absolutely deserved, and you would have been absolutely right in it, you kind of hung those people out to dry. There's no legislative misconduct here. Everything was handled appropriately. This is like Becky Hadlock in Weston County saying, there was no problem with our election. Of course, maybe that's a mischaracterization. But my point is, that had they switched up the order in Jeremy Harrelson's speech, it would have been very different. But instead, he led with, there's no legislative misconduct. Now, it might seem like I'm a little bit irritated this morning, because I am. Because the base works so hard to get conservatives into power, which they are, and then they just kind of fumble the ball, which they did in the end. My friends, I have to tell you that none of this even sounds like governing. Now, it's true that they did hold back some of the governor's excesses in his budget. That's absolutely true. In fact, I think the end of the budget was like $9.9 billion, which is a little bit north of what it would have cost to do the same thing last. So that's true, but that's down in the weeds. And what happens more often than not is very much what happened in the media. That it is the big headlines that people remember. Now, you got to think, if you want Republicans to fight for you, if you want conservatives to fight for you, they will, and they have. But you got to give them something to fight with. You got to give them some ammunition. And going out like a lamb yesterday, man, that wasn't giving them something to fight for. So now all this sounds like I'm being sort of a downer this morning, and maybe I am just a little bit. But let me tell you how we fix this. All conservatives have to go home to their district and explain exactly what happened. And unfortunately, there's 4 of them that's going to be really, really hard. But they can do it. You can make the case. And that's what conservatives are really good at. Prove that the Democrats are lying. So instead of it coming from the bully pulpit at the legislature, now conservatives have to go home and make that case. Now, it's true that there are, like I said, there were a number of conservatives that fought really, really, really hard during the session. But they didn't get the backup that they needed in the end. And that sometimes, almost always is what people remember. So when we come back, I'm going to give you the other side of this, and then we'll continue on with the program. But first, let's take a break. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. I forgot that's in the soundbite. You see, every time that I travel, I've got different equipment that I take with me, and this little gem over here I don't get to use very often. And sometimes little blips happen on there. But anyway, my friends, welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live, broadcasting to you for the last time, hopefully for a long time, in the swamp. I'm headed up to Wheatland today to go visit with Harriet Hageman. We're going to do an interview this morning, and so I'm going to go brave the wind outside. It's kind of still it seems like it's calmed down a little bit. I hope so. But anyway, my friends, welcome back to the program. David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Over the years having this program, I've had a lot of people tell me, David, you're too conservative. You need to maybe appeal to the middle a little bit. I've thought about that. That might be good. Get a few more listeners there, and maybe get a wider audience. But then I realized, why would I do that? I've already got a giant audience here, and thank you very much for listening. And we always talk about how conservatives can win, and this is the next part that I want to tell you about. You see, all of those people that tell me, David, you're just, you're too right-wing. You're a right-wing extremist. You're hard right. I've heard that so many times from Claire McFarland. Oh, by the way, as it relates to Claire McFarland, I did not miss that article she wrote. And the big shocker, she misquoted me again. But I have something special in mind for Claire McFarland and the cow pie, but you're going to have to wait until Weekend Update to hear it. Oh, I've come up with maybe it's a little gift for Claire McFarland. But you're going to have to wait until Weekend Update on the podcast to find out exactly what I have for it. I'm telling you, my friends, you're going to love it. absolutely love it. Well, the truth is, my friends, that principles matter. And that there is one thing, if there is only thing, and there's actually a lot of things that are different between the Democrats, the liberals, and conservatives. And one of those big ones is that we have principles. They don't. And I think that this session is a perfect example of how they really don't have any. But see, conservatives have to stand on those principles, which is what a lot of the members of the House of Representatives do. A lot of the conservatives in there, absolutely, you cannot budge them off of the things that they believe. Look at Agent 29. He is the same person that he was when he started running for office that he is now. He's saying the same things. He hasn't changed his message. And frankly, I can't wait for his announcement, because it's probably going to come out something like, I told you what I was going to do when I ran for office. If you don't like that, vote against me. Nah, it probably won't be like that. But the point is that Ken stands on his principles, that he always has been. He's a conservative, and he believes in guns and freedom and all of those things that all of us conservatives believe in. But there's others like Nina Weber. Nina Weber is the exact same person that I met 6 years ago when I started this program, before she ever ran for office. She's the same solid Republican conservative that she has always been. Or Ann Lucas, or Paul Heft, the list is long and distinguished of people that they fight hard. And Ann Lucas is a really good example. She went up against Dan Zwanitzer, which, by the way, yesterday, did anybody else notice that the outcome of yesterday was very, very similar to the outcome when the whole Dan Zwanitzer thing happened? Did you pick up on that? That, we spent all this time working on it and giving them ammunition, and all of a sudden there's nothing. Now, of course, the difference there is you had Eric Barlow as Speaker of the House. This time we had a conservative. And there was a little admonishment of Carly Provenza in the end, though, again, I think that's what they should have led with. It's kind of like burying the lead. I get accused of that all the time on this show. David, you buried the lead. There's this big story. You didn't tell people about it till the end of the episode. Well, maybe I want you to listen to the whole episode before I give you the big story. But anyway, that's what they did yesterday, is they buried the lead. And so here is what conservatives have to do differently than what they're doing right now. They've got to be upfront with their principles. They've got to fight. Because the base is fighting for them. The base fights for them every single day. They're the ones that are writing letters to the editor that most of the time don't get published. I've got a letter to the editor I got to publish before I head to Wheatland today. But they're the people that are on the ground fighting for conservative principles. And so the legislators and the people that are running, the conservatives running for office, they have to fight too. They have to give the people something to believe in. And it's not to say that they haven't done that. There's some good things that have happened this session. There absolutely was. There were some wins. But again, you're fighting a multi-pronged war in that you have to fight the media, you have to fight the actual Democrats, and you have to get your message out. So we have to work harder and do a better job than the rest of everybody else. Elisa Campbell, can she really get up and say, look at all the wins we've had? You get her on a stage with a conservative, I don't know, put Jamie Lean. Jamie Lean's another good one. Though, there's, and here's the other thing too. We've got to stand strong on principles. Those principles that are in the Republican Party platform, the ones that the base, they absolutely believe in. It was the base that wrote the Republican Party platform. Some of those people are in the legislature right now. Some of them helped write many provisions in it, helped take what was a huge document, like a 50-page document or something, and file it down to 23 points. Stand on those principles, and don't waver off of them. You see, one of the things that most impresses me about this audience, about you, is that you act. The difference is I can come out with a story, some big story, and then I'll see it on social media, an hour or two later, where you've picked up on it, you've done your research, and you're running with it. You've taken the ammunition that comes from this program, and they're out there using it. And so that's what conservatives have to do if they're going to win in this upcoming election, is they've got to deliver the ammunition that the base can fight with. That's what they have to do. Tell them that it was the Senate that thwarted a lot of this. And be specific. What exactly did the Senate do? Well, they didn't do a lot. And I mean, this is an easy argument to make. While the House was working late until the night, the Senate was off eating pizza in the president's office. It was the Senate that was hanging out, not the entire Senate, but the leadership anyway, that was hanging out with lobbyists at the same time that they were accusing people of taking checks. I mean, think about this, right? It's not a hard argument to make, but it has to come from up here. If you're an elected legislator, you got to give your base something to fight with. And there were a lot of wins. Now, yesterday after the session, the Freedom Caucus held a press conference in the Capitol Rotunda. And let me just play a little bit of it for you. So here you go. Ah, that's the wrong one. Hold on. How about there?
Despite the legal
There we go. Got it.
to complete school finance recalibration this session, the insiders who used to control this entire building failed to do so for 15 years. Conservatives, led by our very own majority floor leader, Representative Scott Heiner, recalibrated our basket of goods in a way that focuses on the classroom.
Yep, right
not
on, right
the
on.
administration.
Definitely a win.
The governor and his friends were eager to see the biennial budget fail, standing ready with fingers to point at conservatives. But it didn't. We passed a budget that funds core constitutional functions of government while allowing the growth of government, while slowing the growth of government itself. Our conservatives on the House Appropriations Committee crafted bills to prepare us for fire season.
Okay, all right. That's enough of that. But she's absolutely right. Recalibration is a big win. That's a win that hasn't happened in over 20 years. And so the Freedom Caucus, they were absolutely right to come out with that at their press conference and say, look, this hasn't happened in 20 years. All the people that have said that they have supported, teachers and schools and your children and all that, they haven't done that. All they've done is kept throwing money at it, and they've never taken a look at it. Now, here's the big difference, and I think this is a huge win here, is they were able to silo classroom money so that it stays in the classroom, which means teachers actually get a raise. It's not left up to the administration anymore. Now, remember last session when they passed an 8.5% raise for all school employees? Remember that? And the districts didn't give it to them. Well, there was one. And they actually gave a 10% raise. I think that was Sublette County, or anyway, it was one of the counties that, frankly, they don't have nearly as much money as Sheridan or Natrona or Laramie County or even Teton County. Teton County gave an embarrassing raise to their teachers. It was like 1% or 2%. It was an insulting raise. But see, now administration can't do that. No, the money that goes to the classroom has to stay in the classroom. And think about how big of a win that is. The first time in 20 years they've been able to do that. And so they've got the argument that, hey, these people over here said they supported teachers, but look what we did. You see, you've got to stand on those arguments. And the Freedom Caucus was right to bring that out the very first thing. Now, the budget, I disagree. I think the budget was kind of a disaster. Because they pretty much went with what the Senate said, and for a number of reasons. There were hundreds of amendments in the House. I mean, hundreds of amendments, many of which were the same. And so you hear the same argument over and over and over, and unfortunately, you get beat down. And by my count, maybe there was 15 conservatives that held the line the entire time. And so that is something to run on. So you've got to deliver those arguments to the base so that they can fight for you. And so none of this, I know that I was a little gloomy when I started out the show, and I woke up on the wrong side of the bed or whatever you want to say. But coming from me, a guy that fights every single day on this program and makes the conservative case, well, I want something to fight with too. And it's hard to go into battle if you don't have the right armaments. And, like I said, there are members of the House that did a really good job. And even the folks in leadership fight really, really hard. They just made another dumb decision. And that's what that was, not holding Carly Provenza accountable, which is, this is the biggest problem that the conservative base gets ticked off with, that there's hardly ever any accountability. No accountability for Dan Zwanitzer or Steve Harshman or, by the way, I was looking through the little piece of equipment that I had, and the button number 4 over here is actually Steve Harshman when he said some really terrible things about Chuck Gray on the floor of the House. There was no accountability for him. Eric Barlow took his computer privileges away for a couple days. That's it. He had to show up to work. But that's all that happened to him. And so, the accountability is going to be up to us, the conservative base. We are the ones that are going to have to hold these liberal redcoats accountable. And there's a lot of them. J.R. Riggins, man, he campaigned as a conservative. And according to Evidence-Based Wyoming, I told you this yesterday, maybe he's a 70%er. I mean, that guy voted really, really, really terrible. Made arguments against the SAPA bill. There's another one. That's a perfect one right there to fight with. Conservatives believe in the Second Amendment, period. That the government doesn't really have any place telling you if you can or you can't own firearms. And they certainly don't have any place taking them away from you. And so there are a ton of sound bites from the floor of both chambers when they were talking about the SAPA bill. They are ready-made campaign ads, my friends. There is no two ways about it. One that comes to mind is Cody Wiley. He stands up and he says, but, we can't have this law. But, we have to have reasonable restrictions. But, law enforcement, which, by the way, the bill does absolutely nothing, to individual officers, except if they unconstitutionally seize a weapon, then they could be held criminally liable, okay? But there's not a $50,000 fine. It goes to the agency. It goes to the police department. And one of the biggest arguments is, hey, a lot of this stuff is already Wyoming law. And then you take it to them with what the governor did. The governor vetoed a bill that would have protected your constitutional rights, period. Now, I get it. It's a hard argument to make. You had 23 sheriffs. They were there I don't know if all 23 of them were in the House yesterday, but there was a lot of them. Levi Dominguez from Sheridan was there. By the way, I've got a bone to pick with you, Sheriff Dominguez. We'll talk about that a little bit later, how you're campaigning against my Second Amendment rights. You're going to love it because, I don't agree. Anyway, my friends, there are arguments to be made, and certainly there's a case. And just because leadership fumbled the ball yesterday, that doesn't mean that a lot of really cool, really great conservative legislators don't have a case to make. But now they've got to. Like they got one less weapon in the quiver, but they can go home and make the case to their constituents, which is what they absolutely have to do and ought to do. All right, so now let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about the race for U.S. House. There's been a couple of other people that jumped into this thing. It's becoming kind of a circus. Now, we already had Secretary of State Chuck Gray. He was basically the first one to announce that he's running. And then there's Jillian Balow, David Geralt, and then Reed. Oh boy, Reed. Just to give you a heads up, I have an interview that I'm doing with David Geralt on the 17th of March. I don't know when exactly we'll play it, but it'll be a day or two after that. So that's coming up. That's going to be a fascinating discussion. I don't know of anybody that really knows that much about him, except for what's on his website, Army Ranger. I think that's going to be a fascinating interview. But let's kind of go down the list here. So Chuck Gray, we know a lot about him. He's a stalwart conservative. He always has been. During the 6 years that he was in the House of Representatives, that guy fought a lot. And, he's had some big wins, like the ban on crossover voting, voter ID. Voter ID was one of his first ones. And what he's been able to do as Secretary of State. Now, Jillian Balow, on the other hand, friends with Liz Cheney. Pretty much enough said. But she quit her job as Superintendent of Public Instruction here in Wyoming to take a job in Virginia, in which she then screwed up the Virginia school budget. That's a whole... this is going to be a fun story to do about her when we get to the episode of Who Really is Jillian Balow. Going to be fantastic. And then Reed Reisner, the guy who has been able to do something that no other politician has been able to do in Wyoming, and that is unite everybody. against him. Now he's spending a crap load of money in the on TV and Facebook, and I mean and you got to hand it to him, man. He's got the cash and he's throwing it around, but that is not going to buy off Wyoming conservatives because you have to make the case. And Reed, well, during his race for against John Barrasso, he didn't do a whole heck of a lot of that at all. In fact, he was running around the state talking about family values when it came out that he was married to a man. Sorry, Reed, I've got the marriage certificate. Anyway, there's another guy, and his name is Kevin Christensen. Now, and this is a fascinating article, and I kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, but let's go through it. This is from Oil City News, and I quote, Casper native and military veteran Kevin Christensen is planning to run for Wyoming's U.S. House of Representatives seat as a Republican. According to his website, Christensen grew up in Casper and graduated from Kelly Walsh High School before heading to the University of Wyoming for a degree in electrical engineering. He also earned going on through his pedigree. I don't think that's all that interesting, but he was in the military, and let's see here. He earned decorations including Air Medal, Defense Superior Service Medal, Army Combat Action Medal. Okay, so Valorous Unit Citation as commanding officer. All right, fine. But here's the interesting part. When you scroll down, it says that, let's see here, where is it? He works in Denver, of all places. So I doubt very seriously that he is commuting from Cheyenne or from Casper to Denver. In fact, the truth is he's probably living in Denver, which is kind of a peculiar quirk in the U.S. Constitution, that you don't actually have to live in the state that you're representing. We learned that from Liz Cheney. She didn't live in Wyoming. Now, she did own a house in Wilson, but as far as living here, she lived in her multi-million-dollar mansion in Virginia. And I'm trying to see here. Let's see. Where does it say? According to his website, let's see. Christian for the Republican candidates, blah, blah, blah. All right. But anyway, maybe it's another article I was reading. But he actually does work in Casper, which is really, really interesting if you ask me. But I don't think it's really going to help him in the race. So now let's move on. Wyoming legislature adjourns with no more veto overrides. So this is a piece from the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. But here's the thing. The reason they came back to the legislative session after a little break is so that they could override any of Governor Gordon's vetoes. Now, as it happened, though, they weren't able to override any new vetoes. Now, they did override a couple line item vetoes, and that's before they left last Friday for their little break. But as far as yesterday, no, they weren't able to override anything. The override vote for the SAPA bill failed in the Senate miserably. It was like 18 to 21 or I mean, it was like 12, 12 to 18, I think is what it was. So that failed. So no SAPA bill. And then the union bill, House Bill 178. Now, that wasn't a union-busting bill at all. What it would have done is prevented payroll deductions for union dues. And I think that there was 36 votes in favor of overriding in the House, which is not close to a 2/3 majority. So there weren't any override votes to be had there. All right, so let's go ahead and take another break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the program. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm your host, David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Welcome back to the program, my friends. By the way, I should have led with this, but I did talk to Chip Nyman about the education spending. It turns out statewide, benefits and everything included, we actually do pay our teachers about $100,000 a year. And that's the statewide average, according to Chip. But so, I mean, teachers are pretty well paid here. But like I mentioned before in the show, that, now all that money is siloed to the classroom. So classroom money stays with the classroom, and that's an absolute win. So let me just kind of wrap this whole thing up, and then I got to get on the road to Wheatland so I can go interview Representative Hageman. All told, essentially in the session, conservatives should have fared a little bit better. And given everything that was happening during the session, I don't really think that they did too terrible. I mean, they did fumble the ball at the end, and that was a big mistake that they're going to have to fix. But as far as the other conservatives, most of them fought really, really hard. I mean, I was there for pretty much the entire session, and the individual conservatives in the House, they don't have too much. They don't really have anything to be ashamed about. In fact, they've got a lot of things that they did right. A lot of good pieces of legislation. The trouble is, they had to deal with the Senate, and the Senate now, I think they've absolutely earned the reputation of that's where conservative bills go to die, because that's what they did. And if you've got Slithers Nethercott in charge of everything, by the way, I've got an interesting story coming on Slithers that maybe I'll do tomorrow on the show. Turns out she wasn't being entirely honest, go figure, when she spoke on the floor. Well, my friends, that'll do it for being in the middle swamp. I can't tell you how excited I am to get the heck out of here. It's like that movie. I try to get out and then they pull me right back in. But we'll be back tomorrow, my friends, with another episode of Cowboy State Politics Live. And make sure you call your legislator and talk to them, find out what happened during the session. And I'm sure they'll have plenty to talk about. So for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns, from the middle swamp. See, I'm already wanting to get home. From the middle swamp, I'm David Iverson, and this